Welcome back, everybody. As of the 7th of October, we enter the 7th day of the government shutdown. And while politicians are arguing about spending caps and party messaging, the real-life consequences of their inaction are starting to set in. And the real-world consequences are starting to be felt by those who are already living on the edge. One of the first programs that we see in the crosshairs here is WIC, which is a government food assistance program for women, infants, and children. More than 6 million mothers depend on WIC to provide their children with baby formula, baby food, milk. But because WIC is listed as a discretionary program and not mandatory, WIC is actually in danger of running out of money this week. Right now, it's being kept afloat by $150 million worth of reserves. But once that's depleted, families will begin to be turned away. Let's be clear. The shutdown isn't just about funding, it's about leverage. Certain politicians use it to extract concessions, to win political points with their constituents, or simply to prove ideological points for fiscal responsibility. But what makes a shutdown powerful is the pain that it's able to exert on the poorest people in America. The disruption of services that people rely on creates pain that's not just harmful, but it's pressure that keeps them down, keeps them silent. The pressure is important because it keeps politicians from actually engaging with the true problems that spending really comes from. Government contracts, subsidies for oil fields. Instead of actually focusing on that, it targets WIC, it targets unemployment offices, it targets food aid, the programs that serve the poor, the needy, the indigent, because these people don't matter. These people don't have any kind of political power or political leverage, because let's be honest, infants and mothers can't launch lobbying campaigns. During the Great Depression, President Hoover actually resisted food relief, thinking that it would cause public dependence on the government. It was only after mass protests and an electoral defeat that Roosevelt actually launched programs like WPA and food stamps. In the 1980s, we saw Ronald Reagan paint the image of the welfare queen, people who are on food stamps, people who are on assistance, as people who are just using it to buy vodka. Part of a moral panic that led to very deep cuts in these social programs. In the 1995 government shutdown, things like food stamps and WIC were some of the first programs to be affected. And during 2018 to 2019, during Trump's 35-day shutdown, over 40 million people saw their SNAP benefits face potential disruption. This is common, and it's always, like we said, the first cuts to go are the cuts to the American people. The cuts to the programs for those who need them the most. There's this underlying logic that's always been there in America, at least since the Industrial Revolution, where we have to demonize the poor. Well, we have to see them as just useless leeches or vermin in society. We have to blame the poor for everything and treat their hunger not as a tragedy, but just as a cost of doing business in America. And at the heart of this is a dangerous economic ideology. It says if people are hungry, it's because they didn't work hard enough. It says government aid should not provide, it should incentivize. And it says that aid should be temporary and conditional, and more importantly, politically expendable. But here's what this ideology ignores. Hunger isn't a choice. Economic hardship is not a personal failure. And access to food should not depend on political majorities or budget deals. In 2024, the US spent $877 billion on the military, giving away hundreds of billions of dollars in corporate tax breaks. Yet WIC costs just $6 billion per year. That's less than 1% of the Pentagon's budget. And still, it's the first to go up on the chopping block. And why? Because cutting WIC doesn't hurt donors. It doesn't affect Wall Street. It hurts those who have no lobbyists, those who are told they should be happy with the crumbs that they're given. It's not about cost, it's about control. A government that cannot or will not feed its own children has broken the social contract. The founders of this country did not intend for this country to simply be a vending machine for the wealthy. The New Deal, the war on poverty, Medicare, these are things all born of struggle, of protest, and the demand for dignity. But today that leverage is unraveling. Public needs are sacrificed for political stunts. Food becomes leverage, and the working class is told to wait while the markets remain open. But it doesn't have to be this way. There is a better path, but it begins with truth, organizing, and demands. We must demand mandatory protections for these food programs so they can't be the first on the chopping block. Mandatory protections for WIC, for school lunches, for SNAP, so that they can't be used as political pawns. Full funding independent of budget fights, and transparency for those who vote for these cuts, so that their constituents, many of which are from poor, rural communities, who are told that these cuts aren't going to affect them, but in many cases, up to 70% of those who are on these assistance programs are from conservative areas. But more importantly, there has to be direct actions to actually make this happen. People need to go to town meetings. They need to get involved in politics. They need to get involved in protest. They have to get involved in the political machine if they actually want to change the political machine. As difficult as that sounds, it's the only way to actually get any kind of change to happen. We have to reframe food as a human right and not just a privilege. No person in the United States should go to bed hungry. No child should have to come home and wonder if they're going to have dinner. No child should go to school and think that they're not going to have lunch. Hunger shouldn't even be a possibility in America. Because let's face it, if a government can't provide a child 3 meals a day, then what exactly is it protecting? Because we have the resources, we have the knowledge, we have the history that guides us. But what we lack so far is the political will to actually force the change to happen and place human dignity above profit games and party politics. Because no government that lets its people go hungry while they play politics deserves your silence. On this channel, I've long said that they've been coming for these programs, and those on the right said that no, it's only going to take it from those who are abusing the system. But those who are actually abusing the system are such a small fraction of people. It isn't 16 million. It is not even close. What you're going to see is a lot of people from the working poor, the working class, a lot of single mothers who are going to have to choose between feeding themselves and feeding their kids. We're going to have to choose between buying dinner for them or buying formula for their baby. And that's not something that I'm comfortable with, just to support budget cuts for billionaires. I don't think any empathetic, sane human being would be okay with that if they actually thought beyond the party lines and actually saw into the consequences of cutting these programs. There's a reason why we have them. There's a reason why they were developed and put in place. And it wasn't just to give free stuff away. America, for the most part, has done away with hunger. There's not been a famine in America since the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, where people couldn't afford food, really. We had difficult points where things were more expensive. But what we're seeing right now is an immediate upward trend in childhood food insecurity. And this is just going to exacerbate that. This is going to make that terrible. If you're not familiar with WIC, let me tell you what that's like. You can get some beans, you can get some vegetables, right? You can get formula, you can get baby food, you can get skim milk, right? You're not getting lobster, you're not getting, big steaks. It's not what it is. It's the staples and essentials that people genuinely need. And when you take away the staples and necessities for people, people don't have the necessities to live, and their choices become very hard. And the thing is, most people in America are quite spoiled and have never gone through any kind of genuine hardship, so it's very difficult for them to relate to what it's like for most people in the world. But as we see our economy slip and our social programs be cut away, starvation, childhood hunger in America will become normal. I remember growing up with commercials showing starving kids in Africa, and I don't even think they show them anymore. But what are you going to do when you start seeing videos and images of starving kids in America? Will you still stand so boldly behind your party lines and say that this is for the good of the people? That these are just welfare queens? That they shouldn't be helped? That this is all just God's will? I would like to think no. I would like to think that there is an empathetic side to this argument that is being suppressed by naivety and ignorance. But the more harm that I see being done, the more violence being done on our people, the more troops that I see on our streets, the more families being ripped apart by ICE, and the more I see people cheering it on and watching it on their lunch breaks and laughing and enjoying the suffering of their fellow countrymen, fellow human beings, the less sure I am that empathy actually holds through the heart of everybody. And maybe that's a sobering reality that I've denied for too long. The truth is, there is good and evil, and it's just a series of choices that lead us to one side or the other. And that side can shift. And we have to be very careful what side we choose, because the side that used to be good may now be the side that's become evil. And I think that a lot of Americans need to stop watching the mainstream media and start watching the consequences of policies as they continue to rip children from their parents' arms, as they continue to see people locked away with no legal representation or due process. Well, they begin to see a common practice of single mothers unable to get formula for their babies and more crying babies around, or people just not having kids anymore, less than they're already having now, because there are no programs to get any kind of stability in a nation where one job alone isn't enough to provide for a kid. I was raised by single parents, and I don't think that they could do it today, because the whole system works against normal people at this point and has starved us of any kind of choice or any kind of self-navigation through our lives. We only act out of necessity and desperation at this point, and as more of these programs go away, we find millions and millions of people who are now thrown into despair and poverty, beyond the poverty that they were in. Without this support, their situation becomes more dire. And think of what that does to children who grow up with that experience. Think of the trust that they'll have in the system. Think of the trust that they'll have in those who laughed while their mother couldn't afford food. Those who called their mother a deadbeat, a welfare queen, because she wanted to feed her children. The political showboating has to stop, and something has to be done. If you know anybody who's struggling, if you know anybody who's on WIC and they're in danger of having it cut, do what you can. You know, we shouldn't have shame in ourselves for reaching out for help if help is exactly what we need in that moment. We need to be able to rely on our friends, and we need our friends to understand that they can rely on us, even if what we can do is meager and small. A meager and small action can mean the world of difference to people. So give what you can and do what you can. If you're still here at this point, like and subscribe, have a share, hype it up, think about becoming a member, donations. This kind of stuff genuinely breaks my heart. As a person who grew up in poverty and didn't always have food, I can tell you that it does a lot of damage to you as you grow up. Most people don't understand what it's like to grow up with uncertainty surrounding everything. You know, not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow, not knowing what's going to happen in the evening. It's not something you want anyone to grow up with if you've been through that. And I genuinely fear that we're going to have new generations that are growing up in distress, in fear, in poverty, in a socially manufactured famine. And I don't think that there's a way to really walk that back. I don't think that there's a way to justify that. I think that when these people grow up and wonder why they had to go hungry while politicians were partying and buying yachts, while farmers were getting bailouts, while Argentina was getting a bailout, you know, when Israel was getting funded. I don't think that there's going to be tolerance from those people, and I don't think that we should expect it. People who grow up in that kind of hardship genuinely are usually going to find the system in which they grew up in incredibly hostile and wouldn't mind seeing it burn down. As I've said before, every action this administration takes in the end, and I'll throw Democrats in this too because they are not doing anything, right? While the right is systematically destroying America and the social safety nets and the social programs that Americans actually need, all Democrats are doing are going on TV with sad faces, you know, posting hashtags on Instagram or X, and just making sure that hopefully they get voted in next election cycle. They're all gross. They're all disgusting. They're not for us. They're not for us people. Rely on each other, create community, give to each other, support each other, support the children, and make sure that they don't go hungry. Make sure that they still have magic in their lives because they deserve it, because they're not part of this bullshit. And most of us aren't part of this bullshit either. And none of us want this. And we all just want it to stop. But it's all being forced on us at this point. And it's just, at some point, people are going to have enough. At some point. I hope. Because if we don't, then we accept tyranny. Have a good one.